Airtable is because you can look at it like a spreadsheet and visualize the data that is held in it. Pretty soon we're going to be talking about how to actually access databases, but I don't know. Do any of you want to do that right now? Me either. So when we create one of these design projects things, it gives us what looks like a table that's like, here's a name, here's a category, these are all columns, right? These are all things that store certain values, so each item in each row could have a value for each of these. It doesn't necessarily have that though. And so this morning, if I go to my code, I was running into this error. I was attempting to decode something called due date, which is one of the columns here. So each thing should have a due date, except that when we were last talking about my specific Airtable design projects table, I created a new row. And so I didn't fill in any of the properties in here. I can do that. I can go and do this. I give it a check mark. Airtable is pretty helpful. This is pretty cool. I'm going to add that. Oh, I can upload a file. I wonder if I can add a GIF. Let's try. Upload. Neat. Add that one. Yeah, okay. Maybe that'll work, who knows. You can fill in your clients. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do. And so side note, if you are thinking of pitching tomorrow and you want to be able to store some information remotely, you might consider an Airtable project so that you don't actually have to create a database or a server. You could just use your project. Just a thought. You could also go looking for stuff. But here is the thing. Before, when I created this new instance of coffee packaging, there was no due date. And so when I went to run my project, build failed, blah, 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 blah. When I went to run my project, I had my model set up so that everything would be successfully decoded. I said, all this stuff should work. So I've got a due date and a string that I'm trying to get at. If you want to look more into how these models work, please do. For our sake, just you can use them as they are. I promise you they'll work if you're accessing the right space in the API. But when I run this, I run into an issue. It says something about there's no value associated with the key encoding keys with the string value of due date. And that's because when it goes and it hits the API, it runs into a specific instance of one of the rows, whatever we want to call them. In this case, it ends up being like, I don't know, ultimately a project. It looks at all the rows, and it is looking to decode the values that it sees in those rows. And we could look at this in JSON. We could say, okay, it's looking for a due date. It's looking for all this stuff. This JSON is represented in a different way on the web, but it's looking at the same information. An issue that I ran into is that my project specifically wanted to decode a name value with the capital N being the key we were getting from the API, so either looking here or in our server, and a due date value. So something due under space date. And so I looked around all this way and I was like, what's wrong with my Swift code? But really what happened was there was no value for due date. And so it thought when it was doing decoding of a project that it needed to have a due date. And so that's how I got that error. Let me show you. It says it couldn't find a value associated with the key due date. What I did to fix it was I made it optional. Sometimes that'll happen. That was what I did to fix it specifically then. But here's the thing. I want to set up this app. So the app we have here. Our goal today is that we're going to set up this app so that we control the fields that get created when we make a new instance of one of these projects. And that's what our post request is going to be. We are going to provide the format of an object that gets sent to the API that when we do it, will create a new row in this table. I'm going to add back in that due date so that it doesn't have to be optional. Do next week. We want our app to create things in the way that the API, in a way that the information would make sense to other people if they were using our API. And so when I create a project, if you look at my table here, a bunch of them have due dates, a couple of them don't. And I don't want to provide that experience to other people. For example, I don't want to have to say to them, yeah, some things are due and some things are just not due. That doesn't make sense. We want due dates on all of our things. And so we are today going to set up a new view controller whose job it is to create new instances of whatever we call these rows. I call them projects. It makes sense on this table because it's called design projects. We are going to set up a new view controller that what values does it need to provide in order to tell the server I want to create a new project? What have we said that when you use our app you must have? Crystal. What properties? No. What properties, when we create a new one of these projects, would we have if we created an instance of project in our Swift code? Let's do this part first. This is a struct called project, just like plenty of other structs you've seen before. What properties does it need when you create one? We need a due date and a name. And because that's how it's going to function in our app, when we create new instances of a project, we want to say to the server, all right, I get it. Like, if you're going to store the information, then I'm going to make sure I give you all the information you need. Aaron. By info, do you mean the stuff in these fields? Mm-hmm. Like if I created a new column, it'll only add it to your app if you add that to the project struct that you're decoding, right? Because you're going to have to say, I need this value from that JSON that we get in return. Good question. Are you all ready? Let's do the easy part first. Let's make the view. If we do this right, then no one will cry. Are you ready? Okay. Our view is going to be pretty simple. I'm going to just add these changes that I made. What did I change? I don't want that. Hold on. That. Then we'll change view controller as well. Not run print. Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to go to our storyboard. To make life easier for ourselves, first we're going to zoom in, but we're going to embed this in a navigation controller so that we have that back button when we need it. So if I go here and I go to this box with an arrow down in it, that means embed. Click navigation controller. Neat. That was pretty easy. All right, let's go home. Okay. So now what I want to do is, because if you look at the UI here, have a look through it, right? I know we've been doing a lot of things where you click on a cell, or you tap in a cell, and then you segue, right? Or you navigate to the next view. I want to create a new thing here. So I'm not going to be creating a segue from any of these cells. Instead, what we've seen a bunch of times, probably in our apps, I don't know, you tell me, is a plus button. Probably seen a plus button. What do you think that plus button means, Anthony? I want to leave it. Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it. We want to add something new. Great. So I'm going to add a bar button to the top right. Comes up as this item, and in the navigation bar, it automatically starts adding in all this crap. So this is a right bar button item. Typically, the convention is that you would have your add buttons, like your positive buttons on the right side and your negative buttons on the left side. So like if you wanted to delete cells, like if you had an edit button, you'd probably put that on the left side. Keep that in mind. Looking at my button, let's see. It's an item. Aha. When I look at a bar button item, it's got this thing called system item. Just a whole bunch of pre-made things for us. These are built in for us. So when I selected the system item add, it made it into that plus sign that we all know and love. When I clicked edit, it changed the text to edit. When I clicked done, it changed it to done. When I changed it to undo, it did undo. These are all built in for you. Let's see what some of these mean. Compose. Oh, cool. That's that little write email thing or create tweet kind of thing. Reply. You've seen these things before. These are all built into your buttons. So your bar button has all these things built in. I'm going to use the add one. That one is pretty familiar. Sounds good. Let's try. Click on that guy. See if it's the tint that I changed. Red. Aha. Ooh. I'm going to make mine the same orange that I love, which is terrible to look at. But I could change the color of the navigation bar. I'm going to make that black. Ooh. Ah. Neat. Ah. So your navigation controller provides you with a whole bar, right? So if you go to that navigation bar, you can change the color of it. Isn't that cool? Let's run this and take a look at it. At our sweet app. Oh no, I broke it. Oh, I didn't fix all of the due dates. Hang on. Sorry, friends. Yes, do that. Okay. Now there's another one here. You mother. Okay. I could also sort this. Oh no. Oh wait. Make sure they all have a due date. Great. Now they all have a due date. Let's run it again. Great. So now I've got this plus button in my navigation bar. Doesn't do anything yet. Anthony, what did you say you want this button to do? The second answer, not the first one. Cool. So we're going to go to a new controller that we're going to make. This time, instead of listing out details, we are going to create those details. Liana face. Sorry. That was for me. That's the one, Levi. Okay. So I'm going to create the segue action from my button. So like, same thing we're used to with those cells, from my button to there. I'm going to make it a show segue, so I can hit back, or we can do something else later on. Really exciting, I know. And all I'm going to put in here is a label. It says, make a new project. Make this centered. Neat. I will center the text. No. Center. I will go with this purple color. Oh no, it's too big. My bad. Make it smaller. It is a label. What I'm using the label to do is to label. You know? Make a new project. Great. What are the two properties that we need to create a new project? Name and a date. Great. So here's what we can do. My storyboard. Oh, fuck. Sorry. I'm going to just make another label. The job of that label is just going to be to say name. Then next to that, it's going to be a text field. My friend. And I'll line it centered. Someone will type in there the name of that project. Then there's this fancy thing called a date picker. Has anyone ever seen that before? Me too. This is the thing that you scroll and stuff. And when you're on the last value here, so sometimes you see it pop up in a browser and you have to hit done for it to save the value. This works differently because it's just in the UI. So whatever you change it to is where it gets set. Last thing I'm going to do, add a button. That button's job is just going to be for you to say create. Make it a little bigger. Big. My computer is crying. Okay. I'll make it purple as well. Keep my theme. This purple. Great. Yes? This guy? Yeah. Check your objects library. What do you think it would be called? What would be a keyword that would help you find it? Yeah, I agree. It's called a date picker. Displays multiple rotating wheels to allow users to select dates and limits, or dates and times, if I could read correctly. That's pretty cool. All right, the 30-cent question, Kimball. Will this view controller do anything if I launch the app? Cool. What do we need to do? Yeah. How do we do that? Nice. Cocoa Touch class. What do we want it to be a subclass of? Be careful here because I didn't name these things really precisely or well. Right now it says subclass of view controller. What is that thing called view controller? I'll wait. No, what is specifically the thing called view controller? It's the main view controller, that's right. So does this thing get defined in my code or in UIKit? Who wrote the definition for this? I did it. Be careful. If you want a new view controller, you're probably going to want it to be a subclass of UI view controller. If you remember, when you create an app, a single page application, it tries to give you one view controller in the storyboard and one view controller file by default. That view controller in that view controller file is usually called view controller. That is not the same thing as UI view controller. It's not the same thing as UI view controller. View controller and UI view controller are not the same thing. I'm going to call this one create project view controller. I'm not going to click this create zip file, but next unit, we might. I'm going to hit next, gonna create it. So I've got this class called create project view controller. First thing I'm going to do to my storyboard is make sure that I change the class of the one that I want to correspond to create project view controller. Because now when I open the assistant editor, blam, kaboom, blam. All right. Sorry, when I open the assistant editor and I hit automatic, it will automatically give me the assistant, which is this same view controller, the one I'm trying to look at. Get rid of these dumb notes. Get rid of the segue stuff, because I don't think I'm going to segue out of this one. I'm going to do something different, actually. You're all going to love it. Okay. What do you all think? What should we do with this? I agree. Let's create a whole bunch of outlets. Do you want to create an outlet from this thing? This label? Why not, Allison? You're not going to change it. You never need to update the value. That thing will just be there. What I should do is create constraints, but I'm feeling lazy right now, and we've got a lesson to get through. Should I create an outlet from this name thing? Allison, explain again. Yeah, we're not changing it. Don't need an outlet. What about this text field? I agree. We'll create an outlet from this text field. B, what do you want to call it? Is it a label or is it something else? Input text field. What is that input going to be? What specific field for our new object we're creating? Cool. So let's come up with a good descriptive name for this outlet. What do you want to call it? Sounds good to me. Name text field. So now we can reference this just like any other outlet when we want to look at the information that someone is entering for this name. Let's also create an outlet from the date picker. What do you want to call this? Jack. What? Creating an outlet from the date picker. Come up with a fancy name for it. Be a sliver more specific. Nice. That's our date picker. Let's see. I think what I want to do is create one more outlet. Then we'll talk about the networking aspect of this, and we'll see really important, exciting stuff. I'm going to create an outlet from the button, and my goal is going to be when I hit create, I want to disable that button. Because I don't want someone to be able to hit it twice, right? It's like when you are paying for something online, they send you to another page and they say, don't refresh it, don't do anything. Apps are much easier because all you can do is hit a button. You can't really change the website in an app. So if we disable the button when someone hits submit, which we will have to do with an IB action separate to this, we'll want this outlet so that we can literally go and disable that button. So we can reference from our view controller to this view being built in interface builder. We'll want to say, whatever we call this button dot enabled equals false. You've disabled buttons before. You actually did it on your very first project that you created in Unit 2 in iOS. Neat, huh? Sam, what do you want to call this? No, What do you want to call this outlet? Yeah, I love it. I'm just going to call it create button. And that's the button that does the creating. How do we all feel about that? Let's try running it. Cool, I've got an app, shows me stuff. I hit the plus sign, nice. None of this stuff does anything, but I can drag and move around and stuff. I can type in here. Neat. Oh, I just turned it. Oh man, if only I'd used auto layout, it'd be easier to look at. Oh well. I can hit back from here, right? But let's talk about the navigation. When I hit create, I'm gonna wanna go backwards as well. Right? Right, Albert? Do you have any thoughts on what we can do? Yeah. I want to make it go back. What can you tell me to do that? To do what? Segue back? I don't want to do that. Because what it's going to do when I segue back is create a new instance of this table view. I actually want to go back to the one I already had. That's my goal. What can I do? What did you guys learn about in DSA yesterday? What was the subject? Oh, that's right. What did you guys learn in DSA 1 week from yesterday? Neat. All right. How does the stack work? Works like a stack of plates, right? Yes. This is a LIFO structure, or last in, first out. When we have a navigation controller, or really anytime we're navigating through our app, we have a navigation stack. We have a stack of controllers that are added on top of each other. Our root view controller right now is technically, or, man, go away. Go away, go away, go away. The app opens into this navigation controller. But this doesn't actually provide a whole view, right? So the first view we see is that table view. Table view, controller. Then when we segue to that create one, man, it's hard to get this upside down. Okay, when I go to this create one, it adds to my navigation stack a new view controller. If I would have segued when I hit create back to the table view controller, it would have added another table view controller. But what I actually want to do is I want to say when I hit create, or even when I hit back, I want to go back to this table view controller that I already have loaded and get rid of the create thing. What do we call that process of getting rid of the top thing in the stack? Pop. We want to pop from the navigation stack and create project view controller. Isn't it convenient that we learned that in DSA? Wow. Okay, so our goal is to kill that and go back, not to create a new one of these guys. Super important. Do you have any ideas, Sunny, or do you have a question? Nice. Let's do it. What do you think we can do? What are you doing there? Ah, the unwind segue. Remember how annoying that was to set up? Now that we know about stacks and navigation, what we can actually do is refer to the navigation controller that we have here. So this navigation controller, which is kind of in charge of navigating for this view controller and that view controller, we can literally say self.navigationController, and then we can find some method to pop off this view controller. And that's why we didn't spend much time on unwind for segue, because it sucks. It really sucks. Unwind would work here, but in our code we can say, when someone hits this button, we could say, pop off this specific view controller and also do some other stuff, rather than having to refer to, if you remember in unwind, we had to set up that function in the controller that you're unwinding to, which kind of doesn't make a lot of sense except for in specific instances. So I want to say that when I hit create on the create view controller, that's where I define what happens. And all I'm saying is, I've been really morbid in my one-on-ones, I'm just going to stick with it. It's saying, commit suicide, like, kill me, I'm done, okay? I'm sorry, that's not very fun. I'll find a better way to do it. Yeah, sorry, that wasn't really funny. Okay, friends, let's start over. I hope you can forgive me. I am. I'm just kind of, I feel shitty anyway. For anyone listening, that was really not great. This is where we'll create our action. Right now, we're just going to make our action do that popping off of the view controller from this navigation stack. So now I'm going to create the action. The action is going to be of type UI button. And I'm going to say this is create button pressed. I'm describing the action in the name of the action. So that's a function, right? Let's go. We don't need our storyboard really anymore in this, which is great. Go away. So all I want this to do is to say self.navigationController, which is optional. Why? Why is this optional? Let me show you again. Navigation controller. Someone give me a good explanation for why this is optional. Let's try Allison. Maybe you didn't set it up properly. That's true. Why is this navigation controller optional? Sunny.
In your file, it might not be a class of navigation controller, or you might not have navigation controller set up for your view controller.
I might not have navigation controller set up for my view controller. Can you tell me more about that?
You can't just have one view controller and not name it into navigation controller.
And so why is this optional rather than not showing up at all?
In case you want to manually create a navigation controller.
You could do that, but there's a more like Swifty fundamental thing going on here. Michelle? It could be nil, but why does it exist at all? Like anytime I refer to self, I'm referring to an instance of this create project view controller. Why is it, just like any other class, have access to a navigation controller property? I've imported UIKit, and there's something a little more specific. Albert. It's like a default value. It's like when you make a protocol. This is not a protocol, though. What is this? What do we call that relationship? It's the parent class. Okay. What do we call the relationship between them? It's not conforming to a protocol. It's something different that specifically happens in classes. It's a subclass. What's that concept called? inheritance. So this create project view controller inherits from UI view controller. If you go to the definition, we might get there. UI view controller has navigation controller. Oh. Somewhere in there, it's got a navigation controller property. So built into the definition of this parent class is an optional navigation controller. And so when we say self.navigation controller, it's not referring to anything it sees in storyboard. It's just saying if this view controller in here somewhere has a navigation controller, we're referring to that. And so it's optional because your definition of that specific view controller doesn't know what's going on in the interface builder view, except if you add stuff to it. I'm sorry, except if you actually draw that link between it. So unless you say there's an IB outlet or there's an IB action, it doesn't understand anything about how it works in interface builder. And so that self.navigation controller is not coming from interface builder, it's coming from the definition of a UI view controller. Wild, huh? We've learned so much. All right, so let's use that navigation controller, which might exist, might not. Self.navigation controller dot, let's find a method that lets us get rid of this guy when we hit create. Anyone got any ideas? Wow. Pop view controller, nice. Makes sense to me. And here's the thing. If I use this function called pop view controller, what do we know about stack? What does pop do? Nima. It gets rid of the top thing. And so what we are assuming here is we're saying when we use that create button, which makes sense because create is on the view controller that's in the view, it's at the top of the navigation stack. We're literally saying to the navigation stack, pop the top thing. And it's fair to assume that the top thing on the stack is the view controller we're in, right? Seems to be how navigation works sometimes, maybe most of the time. So when I say pop view controller, I'm just saying get rid of the top thing. And in our current setup, when I hit create on the create view controller, nope. When I hit create on the create view controller, that view controller is the top thing. Levi.
So I would wonder if there's a create outlet for the button.
Yes.
Pressing the button gets rid of the
Yes, but what we are going to do when we set up the post call is we're not going to navigate back until we know that that thing has been created on the server. So we're not going to go back until we were able to tell the user, were we successful or did we fail? Because we're going to make a network call. We're going to say, here's some stuff. And then we're going to say in that network call, like, I'm waiting. So we'll probably put something on our screen that says I'm waiting. And then all that stuff. You know what I mean? What do we call that thing where there's a lag? What kind of operation is that?
Oh, that's an asynchronous.
I agree. Our network calls are asynchronous, so we have to wait for them in this case. Let's run it though. We set up a whole bunch of stuff and we can take a break right afterwards. Yay, a view controller. I press that. I hit create and it goes back. It pops off the top thing. Pop. And because I said animated here is true, it gives me like a little bit of like a sliding animation. That's cool. Let's see what happens when animation is false. Say I want to create something. It just got rid of it. That sucks. I'm going to make an animation. Animated equals true. Phoenix.
So the people or the top people there so they become white, like pushing the
You could use push. Um, yeah, and I think we've seen briefly how like prepare for segue and some action on your view controller that pushes a view controller provide you the same opportunity to just set information for that new view controller. Um, I'm probably going to continue until at least the middle of Unit 4 using show segues, but you can, just like you can pop from the navigation stack, you can push a view controller to the navigation stack. We have seen that before. Cool, it navigates. Now we need it to do what the whole day is about. What an exciting day we're going to have. Let's take 8 minutes break. And I'm going to push my changes in case you want them. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, yeah. Wow. Yay. Dun, dun, dun. Everything about this job? Yeah. Yeah. If it was good for everyone, I would totally recommend just the whole classroom be standing desks. Hmm? Okay. Beep, beep. Beep, beep. Beep. Ooh. Okay. Let's do it. So in this repo, we fetched some stuff, right? That's cool. I pulled a fast one on you. I actually changed up this network helper. Yeah, sorry. My bad, but you know. What I did was, instead of using the singleton URL session that we're all used to, created a new URL session. Why did I do that? Oh, you'll see. Oh, you will see, you will see. But so instead of saying URL session dot shared dot data task, it says self.url session dot data task. Those are the same thing, right? Because, well, they're not the same thing, I lied. But those are performing or using the same function because all that shared was an instance of URL session. So is this. Cool? So don't be scared. It's the same thing. Doing the same thing. Here's what I want to do now. We've only been doing GET requests. Let's make a POST request. Yeah. 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 All right. So here's the thing. Our only function has been get data. I want to make something that can do a get, can do a post. And later that we can even add to it, even more and more. But it's only to do specific things for us. So let's say right now those are the two specific things for us. And eventually that function is going to be called, or at least in my opinion it could be called, func perform data task. That's our goal. Perform data task. So we don't know if we're getting stuff, we don't know if we're posting stuff, we don't know if we're deleting stuff, we don't know if we're putting stuff. But I want this thing to do all of that. What is something I can use? What is something I can use to list all possibilities of the types of data tasks that I could create? Kevin, what do you think? What? Oh my God. I love it. Let's create an enum. Enum. You ready? All this enum is going to do is store that information for us. So an instance of this enum will be us getting the type of request we want to do. Liana, what's one of those requests? I'm going to call this REST method. Or REST, I'll call it HTTP method. We'll come back to REST. All I want this to do is tell me literally what type of request I'm doing. You tell me. Nice. Get. Here's the thing. We're going to look at how these things work a little more. We're going to have to change something about how we do this whole URL stuff, because in our get data thing, we didn't provide for the possibility that we might want to not just hit a URL and get some information, but also send to that location some information, right? Because in our app right now, we want to be able to create a new one by sending a name and sending a date. Sorry, that was just for me. What? Not yet. Not yet. Okay, so this thing, I'm going to do all the HTTP methods. That's its job. And so here's what we're going to need. Are you ready? In order to use one of these, we'll still need a URL. So let's say params. This is decent documentation. This stuff here is not documentation. Instead, we'll say something like this function, it's going to be called perform data task. This function performs RESTful HTTP requests. The params we're going to need are a URL. We're going to also need to know the type of method. We're also going to need to know, am I sending any data? And so this is where, when we talk about Codable, we're doing the reverse of what we've done in the past. Codable is a type alias. I hope that's right. Let's take a look. Yeah. Codable is a type alias. What have we been doing with Codable so far, Angela? We've been decoding. Now, for the very first time, we're going to be doing the opposite, which is called what error. We're going to be encoding. And so no matter what, here's the nice thing about our data task thing. Come on, my friends. Before, it didn't need to know, when we were performing a GET request, the type of the thing that it would eventually be turning that data into. It just said, I get data. That's my job. this perform data task thing, it's going to say maybe there's data that you wanted to send that some API client handled turning from one type into the type data. Maybe that exists, maybe it doesn't. Perform data task wants to know nothing about how our Swift models are set up. It just wants that data so that it can go do some kind of task, just like URL session says here. Then the last thing is going to be a completion handler, just like we've seen there. So the two new things are that we need to know the HTTP method that we're performing this time. We need to know whether it's, for our sakes right now, a get or a post. And we also need to know if there's data. Cool? All right, go make it. All right, let's make it. So, we could also say in here what the completion handler results enum with data and success, app error, and failure. Just to help us out. All right, let's look at those 4 params we need. Let's steal these because they're going to be the same, which is really nice for us. We still need a URL, still need a completion handler. The completion handler is the same exact thing. It either returns data or an error. Great. What are the 2 new parameters we need to add? Okay, what's a good name for the HTTP method parameter? Let's call it HTTP method. And that'll be some HTTP method. What's the last parameter? Data, whatever you want to call it. Great. That's this guy right here. It's going to return nothing. Just like our other data task, right? Data is optional. No, I'll ask it back to you. Why is data optional? As an argument in perform data task. There might not be data. For which of our HTTP methods would we not need to be sending data? Yes, you do. Look up here. Or you could even flip a coin. What does a post do? Okay. What does a post do, Levi? And what's the goal of doing that? It's going to update our information on that server, but think of it in terms of models. Is it updating something, so changing it, or is it creating something? Yes, so a post's job is to create a new instance of something. There were other HTTP methods or RESTful methods that did the editing for us on an existing instance. Those are going to be separate. So post needs that data. Get doesn't, though, Allison, to answer your question. Get doesn't need it. And so when we call this perform data task function on a get request, data is going to be nil. Cool? All right. So I want to show you something about data task. Are you ready? Up until this point, we've only been doing get requests again. So data task. There are a bunch of different initializers for it. There's perform data task with URL, which we've been using. But a URL is not going to be sufficient for us because we're going to need to specify how our request works. We're not just going to say, go to this location on the internet and get the stuff there. We're going to need to potentially say, hey, actually, I'm doing a different kind of HTTP method. I'm not just saying go and get this stuff. I'm saying I want to post it. We might also say, I don't know, something like, here's some data for that request. And the nice thing about it is that there is this blobby thing called a URL request that we just provide that information to and don't really need to know how it works, which is cool. I think it's cool. Going back to week 3. Does anyone know how we can set a default value, literally week 3 of the program, how we can set a default value for a parameter in a function? Where would I type something? Are you mouthing the answer or are you singing something? Okay, Levi, can you tell me what you're thinking? What? Let's say before I even get into the body of the function, I want to put it in the definition of the function, or in the signature of the function. I know, right? Yeah. I want to be able to potentially say that one of these parameters should have a default value. And in my mind, the thing that I want to set with a default value is that data. Oh, I could do that. I'm going to make it nil. So just by the function signature, if I use data, it's going to be nil. So this optional type will be nil. There will be no value. But if I give a value for data, then it won't be nil. So by default, it's nil. Otherwise, it's not nil. And this is because we want to protect against situations where, I don't know, something slipped in. And we also want to make it easier for us to be able to say, in a GET request, I'm not worrying about data. You don't send data. You don't send something that it's going to use. Does everyone understand why that works? This is fun, right? Cool, let's keep going so you can use it. Let's go back to this guy. I'm going to create a new URL request. And that's going to be the thing that handles all the stuff I need to know. Aha. We've got 2 initializers. There's something about a cache policy in this thing and a timeout interval, which is really nice, but we don't really know what that is yet. So instead, we're going to want to create a new, I'll make it a var for now, a new request that is this URL request, which we can use in our data task. We need to create a URL in order to use this. Where should we have created a URL? Yeah, we've got a parameter called URL. Now check this out. For a request, a URL request, I can set the HTTP method. That's just going to be equal to the argument HTTP method. I can also set some HTTP body, which is of type data, and that can just be equal to data. So now I've primed this request. Instead of saying yes, yes, I've primed this request instead of just saying go look at a website. I've said look at a website, but also interact with it in a specific way. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to add, if you remember, we talked about RESTful representations of data. So representational state transfer, that's what REST stands for. We said the representation of state that we're used to getting from an API is of what format, Phoenix? Yes. So REST, that's what we said is like kind of the paradigm that we're using to transfer information off the internet. Stands for representational state transfer. Or somewhere there's that word represent. What that's saying is that you are going to transfer some state, so some kind of information in some manner, using a representation that is familiar to other machines. What is the format that we're used to as the representation of information that we get off the web? Think about the requests that you've made in Postman or your app. JSON. So what we need to say is, to our application, just like we have in Postman, where are you at? That it's JSON, we need to tell our application that as well. And so, somewhere in here, if I remember how this works, no, there we go. There's a content type. So in our request, we said the content type should be JSON. So we need to add these keys and values. The key is content type, both words capitalized with a hyphen in between. The value is application JSON. We don't need to add this character set equals UTF-8 right now because some of that gets handled for us, which is cool. And so our request lets us literally just add a value. The value is a value just like we see here. And the quote-unquote key is what it calls the HTTP header field. We could talk more about headers, but I don't think you want to. And so for the value of that key, we're going to say, just make sure you know that the content type is JSON. So you have to add these as strings. It's like adding to a dictionary, just like we see in the headers in Postman. This is all we're doing. It's not magic. We're telling our request what kind of content type it should use. Indicates the resource's media type. Oh, neat. We'll probably run into other kinds of media type. Has anyone tried to ever like load an image off the internet? An image. We have done it, yeah. So we'll probably or potentially need a different kind of content type in our request. Maybe we'll need to update that image helper we made. Let's keep going. So we have set up this request. Now this data task, again, it can be initialized with the URL, and it can be initialized with the URL request. We're going to use the one that lets us use our URL request that we created that has all this information about how we want to be sending data. So instead of a URL there, we'll put a request, and then, oh, a completion handler. I've seen that before. No way. Wow. I can call this data. I can call this response. I can call this error. And now all we need to do in here is that easy stuff where we figure out if we failed or succeeded, right? Not that hard. Easy as pie. So first thing I'm going to do, you tell me. What are we using here? Yeah. Yeah. It does matter. Which one do you want to use? We want to use the one with this signature. We want to say our request is the thing we made here that has all that information about what we want to do. And our completion handler is the same one we're used to. So the difference is that this takes as an argument a URL request instead of a URL object. All right. We've seen this format before. Because this is no longer a GET request, we're going to run into a whole bunch of issues potentially. We're going to need to handle errors in ways we've never seen before. It's incredible. It's so exciting. So we're going to deal with the errors at the end, but first we're going to make sure that we have the other information that we need. So even if I perform a post request, I get back some data about my post request. Because some APIs, when we create a post request, what they do is they send us back that instance. So if we've created something, they'll send us back that instance. Sometimes they might just send back a like JSON that says, you did it. Depends how they intend for you to use their API. But you will get back a data object. That's if you're successful. It should be something you can decode. Again, it could be a blob that just says like key, status, value, success. You see that a lot. But you will get back a data object. And so we will make sure that exists. If it doesn't exist, what do we need to do to complete this closure? So we're not doing that fatal error stuff anymore. I'm really sorry. I know you loved it. Sorry. Instead, we want to end this closure, so to speak. Ayula, what can we do here? Let's use our completion handler to say this was a failure. Then let's go to our app errors, which I also so kindly added for you. You're welcome. Which app error do you think we should use? Have a look through them. Ian, what do you think? No data received. I think that that describes very well what's going on here. That I said, let's make sure there's data. Otherwise, there's a failure, and that failure is that there was no data received. Makes sense to me. What do I have to do to end this function, Ayula? You just said. Got to return as well. Otherwise, it's going to try to keep executing. Now I said we're going to deal with the errors at the end. So we've got data. I want to make sure that we have a response. But let's look at response again. I'm going to do that guard thing because all of these are optional. I'll say let response equal response. What is the type of response? Carrie. Cool. It's a URL response. We ran into something really annoying that we couldn't use that to figure out our status codes from this request. How can we try to do that? How can we say like, okay, I got a URL response, but I want to know more specific stuff about my request that went over the internet using a specific hypertext transfer protocol? Yeah, so I want it to turn into one of those. How can I do that? So I'm going to say guard let response equal response, but there's something we can do to change its type at this step. Or attempt to, at least. All right, pass it to someone. Oh, nice. Got him. So we've got this thing called response. And it's a URL response. And I'm saying, yeah, let's do some optional binding here to make sure it exists. But I also want it to be an HTTP URL response. As, okay. As, there's one more word right here. So attempt to turn response, which is a URL response, into, more specifically for our purposes, an HTTP URL response. Cool? All right. When we grow up, we'll talk more about, because we're not logging into stuff and, you know, all that kind of stuff. We'll talk more about using 404s, using 401s, 403s, because you'll want your apps to work in a specific way. But right now, we just want to know if we got a successful response. What is the range of numbers that indicate to us, if we look at the status codes, that we have a successful response? Tia. 200 to what number? What? I've denoted it like this before. And that stuff means just the range starting with that number. So our potentially successful request could be in the range of, think of this kind of like a where statement, in the range of 200 to 299. I'm going to use this really cool thing that we should Google real quick. We got the range. We've done that before. What is the tilde equal in Swift? Check out this new operator. Ooh, is an operator used for pattern matching in a case statement? You can take a look at how you can use and leverage it. Well, pattern matching. One of Swift's great features is that you can extend the pattern matching system. All right, what does this tilde equal do? Pattern matching is based on the tilde equal. Whoa. It looks at a pattern, which is something. Aha. We might not know anything about this, but because this is an operator, where have we seen other operators? What's another operator? For example, Michelle. Less than. Love it. What's another one? Sunny. Plus. Love it. Kimball, what's another operator? Minus. What's another operator? Liana. Equals. How do I write that? Yeah, but is that, okay, so checking values, right? Double equals. We've also seen triple equals, which is identity, which, like, let's never look at again. But all of those in their definitions, which we have created in the past, their definitions in the signature, they'll say what the operator is, and then they'll say, like, left-hand side and right-hand side, right? This tilde equals is doing the same thing. This pattern is what's on the left-hand side, and it's saying, try to match something on the right-hand side. We are not going to define it. Lucky for us. It kind of works out of the box. It tries to check patterns. And so what it's going to check is, in the range of 200 to 299, does anything in that pattern match what in our response here? Response dot, what value in our response, Jason? Yep. So we have a pattern here that is the range 200 to 299, and we're saying check if that matches, check if this thing over here, so if we look back at the thing, the value, our value is that status code, which is, if I start typing it again, status code is an int. Check if that int, which is the value in our pattern matching blah, 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 Check if that value matches the pattern here. The pattern here is a range. So somewhere in the definition of a range, it might conform to some kind of thing that lets it like be used to do pattern matching or something. I don't know. You could learn more about that yourself. So we are doing a guard statement here to check that the response we got was an HTTP URL response, and that that response had a status code in the success range. That's what we're doing there. Isn't it great? Just like last time, if we create this now, you can use it in the future and not have to think about this every time. So let's guard that that is true. Else, we're going to trigger the completion handler. It's going to be a failure, unfortunately. Let's go back to our app errors and pick out the one that describes the case where our status code was not in the 200 to 299 range. Bad status code. I like that one. Why did you say it's a bad status code? Yeah, it's not a good one. This is bad status code app error. And within our app, we might respond to these different kinds of status codes in different ways. What do we have to do with this guard statement to make sure that we finish execution of the function, Ian? Yeah, I started typing it, sorry. Great. We made sure we have data, otherwise, no data. Made sure we got a success response, otherwise, bad status code. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to check the errors. We're not going to guard the errors because we actually want to be able to adapt to the error that we receive. There are different kinds of errors.
What do you mean when I got?
Oh, I'm going to show you. So instead of guarding that error is nil, or yeah, guard that error is not nil, instead of doing that and saying, you know, some completion handler dot, also error should have 2 R's, completion handler for failure, and then like error. Error is a type, right? Error can probably give us some information. So instead, what I want to do here is I want to look through that error. So I want to actually like dig into the bone. This is kind of like forensic psychology. Like we hate this person, but we should learn about them. If the error exists and we want to use it, then let's look at the error. Fuck. Okay. And now, I want you to think of this stuff as magic. But all errors, I look at their definition. Error, error. All right, let's just go here. Error. It's a protocol. Sounds good. What's going on with this protocol? It could probably came from somewhere. Oh boy. Have we used the term interoperability before? Probably not, right? Most Swift types were created with the idea in mind that there is a problem with iOS apps. And that iOS app problem is people used to code it in a different language. People used to make it in Objective-C until Swift was created. So there's a whole set of already used language variables that exist. When we talk about interoperability, we are saying that Swift types must be able to interact with Objective-C types in certain ways in those same cases that they're used. And so, for example, An error can be safely turned into this other type called NS error. Let's learn about NS error. Or we could treat it like magic, like I said. Let's take a vote. Magic. Learn all about it. What? Is it? What NS error is? Or what interoperability is? All right, let's learn about it. Information about an error condition, including a domain-specific error code, and application-specific information. Whoa. Whereas an error is a type representing an error value that can be thrown. Let's look at NS error again. Information about an error condition, including a domain-specific error code, and application-specific information. This is not a type that comes from Swift. So it's not as pretty as error. But instead, it's giving us a lot of information that we can use. So if we turn our error into an NS error, we can learn about a domain-specific error code, and application-specific information. What is that, you ask? I don't know. Let's find out more. The thing is, here, if I have an error, I can safely cast it as an NS error. I don't have to use optional binding like I did with a URL response turning into an HTTP URL response. Weird, huh? Cool. Let's do it. So it looks like error has this thing called domain. It's a string containing the error domain. What is that? I don't know. Seems like it's a whole bunch of different things that we can look into to find out about an NS error domain. But here's one important one. There's an error domain where our URL loading system errors. Huh, interesting. It's kind of like a type, kind of like a string, kind of weird, right? Raise your hand if you are glad you are not coding in Objective-C right now. Yeah. This is a specific domain of errors. And honestly, I know it's an interview question, but are any of you interviewing tomorrow for a job? Okay. You can learn much more about domains. I will add it to this document I have called Technical Debt. NS error and error domains. Neat. So if the domain there is this thing called NS error domain, so if we got an error, and there's something called a code, which is an integer. I wish I could get more information about this integer, but it won't let me do that. It's just giving me an integer. And they save that somewhere using this integer that is saved as this thing called NSURL error not connected to internet. Let's look at that again. NSURL error not connected to internet. That is just the name of a value that is an int somewhere. Sucks, huh? All we're doing here is we're seeing if it exists that our error has some error code that we're not connected to the internet. That's all we're doing. Sucks, right? I hate it. If that is the thing, gonna make a completion handler, we failed. And let's see, there are app errors. I feel like that's a great idea. So in here, we can check if the error that they ran into was that there was no internet connection. And otherwise, we're going to be lazy. So again, we are in this block of code. So I'll do this guy. Wah, 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 wah. Everything happening right now is in the condition that we can bind the optional error to this thing called error. So error exists and is not nil. We are using error. What we said here is, if we did all the funny stuff we had to do there to figure out that our error was that we are not connected to the internet, tell the user that. Now let's be lazy and describe the rest of this. What does this else statement mean logically? Is there an error? There is an error. So we're still in this block where we are binding error to error, so we're saying that it's not nil. Error is not nil. So we're still in here. What we've determined is basically that the error in this else block is not that we're not connected to the internet. That's not the error we're looking at. So there's still an error, but it's that we're not connected to the internet. And so all we're going to do is be really lazy. The error is that double negative you said. So we determined in here by looking to see if we are connected to the internet. I'm sorry, by specifically looking to see that we are not connected to the internet. That's the error here. If that is the error we ran into, we trigger that error and say, you're not connected to the internet. Now we're dealing with the other thing, any other case. So every other kind of error that could have come up, except for the fact that we are not connected to the internet. We're going to learn much more about the things that we could run into there. But for now, let's pick out an app error to describe that there was an error, but it wasn't that we were not connected to the internet. Other? Other. Okay. Let's take a look. Dot other. A raw error. What do you think this value is going to be? Why do you think error? What is error? Yeah. So it might work in there. Sounds good. What are you missing? All right. Is the signature for your result like this, where the failure has app error instead of error? Okay. You should be able to just say dot, and it's going to fill in based on that enum. Okay, we'll have to talk about it later. All right. So logically, here's what we did. If there's an error, we check to see if it's the one where you didn't have the internet. And we said, if that happened, here's your failure. Then we said every other error, well, I don't know, here you go. You deal with it. So we dealt with the error. We checked that our response had the status code in the success range. And we also checked that we have data. Sunny.
I have a question regarding these particular cases regarding statements.
Mm-hmm.
So you're using a statement specifically for the error component because we want to know if there's an error explicitly. Whereas the two statements before that regarding not using a statement is video.
Yeah, I mean, logically, you can do the equivalent with an if statement as a guard statement. But think of a guard statement as a point in your code where you're saying, let's just make sure this is true. So the syntax is like much more readable for other people in terms of saying, let's make sure that data can be optionally bound into this thing called data. And the nice thing is that instead of creating a whole block where we have to do our work, it's now just making this data variable available to us in the rest of the function. The reason that we went from our old handler where we would guard against an error is that right now we want to actually see if there's a specific type of error. So rather than just saying like, oh, we saw an error, like abort, like there's an error, we want to go in and look at the specific kind of error and provide that information.
So we could have guarded for an error as an optional as an NS error, but then we only would be able to return one of these molecular technologies. Like if we were to guard by error equals error as an NS error, we would only be able to return -43 as the completion error. We wouldn't have the option to return a different error.
Let me put it a slightly different way. If we guarded against it, we would need to do the stuff in here. Like if we wanted to describe it, it's a way of saying, instead of making sure that this is what's going on right here, we're saying, all right, I'm going to do some work with the presupposition that error can be error. So all of the rest, if we did an if let here, all of the rest of our function would have to be inside of the block, like our optional binding here. The else statements are just an else to that optional binding. And so we're using the guard to say, at this point in the code, I just want to know that this is true, as opposed to, it's like a nicer way of writing it because we don't have to put all of that stuff, when this is true, inside of a block that the rest of the function would need to use. So think of it like a check, whereas this is creating like a whole space where we're basically saying, you know, if that's true, then we'll proceed in a certain way. The guard statements are a way of stopping at a certain point.
I understand the guard statements, but for the if statement and the error block, that's, we're writing it like that because we explicitly want to know if the error is going to be known.
Yes. Yep. All right. So we checked our errors, we checked for a success status code, and we made sure that data actually exists. We could have failed in a million different ways. What about right now? We've got data, we've got a success code, and there's no error. What should we do? Trigger success. That's it. So after all this fight, after all that, nope. Send data. The end. That's it. What else? We could dispatch queue it. I'm going to get rid of get data, but before I do that, I'm going to linger. I'm going to linger right at the very end. Are you ready? I'm going to linger right at the very end. I'm going to get rid of get data. I'm going to linger right at the very end. Neat. We need to tell this data task, please actually like go and do your job. Neat. All right. Say that worked. That would really be nice. Oh. Nope. It's at the end of the data task, and you will have to figure that out because we've used it many times. Nope. What is your question? You'll probably have to debug that without even seeing my code. Yes. Cool. We want this to happen asynchronously. What can we do to make that happen? What can we do to say, all right, put it on a thread, but make it work when it's ready to work? We're going to say for this whole data task, within the completion handler, on the main queue, perform asynchronously. What should this code be? Everything. This code is the entire code that we're doing in here. There's our data task. It's glorious. There's an error. Oh no. Oh no. I guess I messed up this. There's so many braces. What am I supposed to do? Oh, nice. Okay. Oh no. There's one extra? Damn. How's this gonna work? What do you suggest I do? There's no member resume. Damn. What should I do, guys? Should I keep looking through everything? Oh, let me close this guy out. Oh, I'm trying to call it on resume. I should be calling it on the data task. What? No, we should debug it as a class. Here's our data task. Question for you. Do you want to take lunch and come back 10 minutes early so that we can actually implement it? Or do you want to keep going into lunch right now and then take lunch until 2:30? Everyone close your eyes. Democracy should be blind. First option, take early lunch and come back early. Raise your hand, please. Second option, keep going and come back and then lunch until late or something. All right, we're going to do the second option. So, what should I do right now? I don't even want to call it yet. I'm scared. I should probably call it. You're right. That makes sense to me, Levi. I agree, but here's the thing. If I commit it right now, it's broken because I'm using that old method. It sure is a shame. Now I'm going to have to use a new thing called perform data task. The nice thing about my perform data task is there are two different function signatures for it. It's hard for me to get this to fill the whole screen, so I got to make it a little small right now, and I do apologize, but one of those in the parameters is going to have the ability for you to give it data. The other is not, because it's by default nil. This is a GET request. Do I need to send data? If it's a GET request, cool. So in my attempt to get these projects, I don't need data. I do need to tell it the HTTP method. There are only two options there. Is it a get or a post? Awesome. Yes. I just want to show you the whole function signature, and then we'll go back to it. So perform data task from a URL using an HTTP method, and then there's the completion handler thing that we're used to. That just gives us data and app error as the potential things that come out of this handler. So I'll just do that. Neat. Let's run it and make sure it works. Oh, cool. Great. So I didn't really do much to my GET request. We implemented that so well that my GET request still worked, and all I did was change what I told it, that this is specifically a GET request. The URL stayed the same. The completion handler stayed the same. So great job, all of us. Yay. Now I'm going to commit my changes. Aha, that whole thing. The whole thing. Great. Adds, perform, data, task, networking, function. I push it up to GitHub. Now everyone can see it with their own eyes if they want. Is there a question in the back? No? All right, let's do this real quick then. See how nicely this works? My perform data task just lets us say, here's some stuff. Let's look at our project. Our project decodes projects in a GET request. What do you think it's going to have to do in a POST request? Aaron. We're going to encode it in a POST request. What would be a good name for this? Think about it. Yeah, that sounds good. Making this a static function again, because I just want to say, this is something that projects can do. Not, I want to do this to a specific instance of a project. So post projects. Actually, just post one. What do you think would be a good parameter to give it? What information does it need? What are you going to post? So this is our project struct. And what it interacts with is the project client API. What do we want to post here? What kind of object? Hell yeah. What type is a project? Oh yes. And just like we've done in the past, also I'm tired, I'm in the wrong place. Should I be making a post request in the definition of a project, or should I be doing it somewhere else? My view controller, sorry, should I be defining it in my project, or was there something else we created for specifically handling the interaction of projects with our network helper? We created this API client. That's just where we were when we defined get projects. So now we can use a function because we have this manager that's a singleton. Great. Okay, let's do it quick. I'm sorry. Let's go. Let's go. Func post project. One of those arguments is going to be a project. Now, what do we probably need to have that we've had every other time? Yeah, let's have a completion handler. I'm gonna steal this. But the thing is here, we're not getting in return a project. We're just getting data. Because we're not going to be decoding the response of this into a project object. We might be able to, but we know from using our perform data task that the result of that is data. And that data might be, yes, something is a project, but it might also just be like a blob that says success. Or it might be the error code and a message saying success. Or it might be a failure. But really, for a post request, the nice thing is all we need is to know whether or not we succeeded or failed. Like we only want to be able to say to Airtable, where are you at? I want to be able to say to Airtable, hey, did you get my info? That's the point of checking for a successful request. It's not a GET request. A POST request is you sending the information. And the only information you need back in response to that request is whether it was good or bad. Let's keep going. Okay, so here's the structure of a project. The thing is, a project itself has a name and a due date. It has a whole bunch of wrappers around it because it's got this big old weird blob when we look at the JSON. Right? I ultimately want something called name. Where are you at? Name and something called due date. That's all I want. But I have to wrap it up in these big blobs. And so I gotta do some stuff in my post. You ready? I'm just gonna type it. Let project wrapper equal a project wrapper that's created with a project, the one that we were provided here. Great. I'm going to check so I'm using a guard let with a try here. Weird, huh? I am trying to do this. I'm trying to encode my project wrapper. What do you think the function to encode something is? JSON decoder, create a new instance of it. What function on here? Yeah. Ah, man, why is it not working? Because you said JSON encoder. Aha, those are two different things. Cool. What are we going to encode? What do we want this to do? What is the name of this constant going to be? Cool, project wrapper. We've got a guard statement here. We need to give it an else. Hey, Sam, feeling lazy right now. Cool. All right. Now here's the nice thing. We can use our network helper again. We can check out that instance. We can go and perform a data task. This time I want to use data because I've encoded a project wrapper. So that data is the project wrapper. The URL, how do I figure that out? There's an Airtable URL. Interesting. Hope that works. I don't know, we'll find out. What is the HTTP method? Kimball. For this function. What are we doing with this function? Look at the function name. Before that, that's a method that we're calling in here. What is the function we are defining right now? Cool. What is the HTTP method that we want to use? You got this. Flip a coin in your head. Yeah, we're using a post. Making our first post. Yay! All right. And now we just get success or failure. Neat. How do you all feel about that? Our perform data task works the same way. It gives us success or failure. Let's look at that result. All right. It's a tuple of 1, so don't need that. Now we can just do what we've done every other time. We'll switch on it. If the case is that we've got a success, and then in there we can call that thing data, then what can we do? I don't know. Trigger some completion handler that we don't have to worry about because this function itself just sends a result. So if that thing was successful, then we're successful, passing the burden down the line. If that thing was failure, then there's an error. And we're not worrying about that. We're just passing the responsibility on as well. That's it. Posting a project from our API client is easy. So all it's got to do is, let's say I write that up. Go, 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 go. Success, failure, success. Let's take a look. Data. Oh, it's an array of data? I don't want that. Sorry about that. Let's build it up. Build, build, build. Works. Our API client does not have to worry about how this is going to be used in the rest of the app. Its job is just to go take some project that it got from somewhere else, send that data to some remote source using the HTTP method post. It doesn't even need to know what a post is. It just needs to pick out the right HTTP method and then tell our network manager, hey, you, do all the stuff. I'm not worrying about it right now. I don't care anymore. But our difference between the post request and the GET request is that when we performed the data task, there were different HTTP methods, and for the post request, we had to provide data. So we had to encode some object that was codable. We encoded that, turned it into data. So instead of turning data into a type we created, we turned a type we created into data. Now, the fun and easy part is we just set up the UI to make this work. Ready? Let's do it. I don't know if my post request works yet, so I'm not going to create a commit. Sorry, friends. Ready, set, go. No, 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 no. All right. When I hit submit, or when I hit create, what do I want to happen? Just not in code. What do I want to happen when I hit create? Yeah, I want to be able to do that post request thing, right? So what do I need to create that post request? Need a name and a date. Great. Let's create a function that goes ahead and checks that those things exist. It's going to be a nice little private function. So I'll make a mark. No. No. Yes. Call these private. Private, func, called, create, project, from, fields. All that thing's job is going to be is to look at the fields in this view controller and try to create a project. If it doesn't, we'll probably trigger some error. That's our goal. Now, one thing we're going to check here is because if you look at a date picker, UI date picker dot date, that is not optional. We don't need to check for the date there as if it was text in a label or a text field. Not optional, because every time you see a date picker, there's some date that automatically comes up, as opposed to there being, bless you, some text in a text field. So all we got to check here is that, remember this guy, guard? Everyone ever seen that? Got to make sure that there's some text in there. If there isn't, that's when we're going to return this thing nil. We're going to say, we couldn't do it. But if there is, we're going to create a new project. Yay, no project. This is going to be the project that we provide to that post function that we're eventually going to use. This name is going to be name. The due date is going to be a string. And here's the thing. Remember how dates work, where they're a thing, like they're their own type, and they suck? The way that we can turn a date into a string in the way that we want. Let me show you that way. I'm going to create this thing called format it. I could actually do this in a different place. We could extend string, right? You've written an extension before a bunch of times. You could write an extension for string that lets you do this as well. Got a private function called format error table date. Takes a date, gets a string, gives a string. All we're going to do is return date dot description. What is that? A textual representation of this instance. All right. What was that again? Oh, it's a string. Oh, a string is an array of characters. Did you know that? So I can call an array method on it. Interesting. For the date, just want to grab the stuff that's separated by white space. This is going to be magic for right now because it's not the important part. But what we're going to do here is we're going to get the date picker dot date, and we're going to call this function on it. Format error table thing. Using that to return a string. So when we want to create a project, this is going long, right? Oh, fuck. We want to create a project here. And so when you press the create button, we want it to call this function which returns a project, right? And so let's do that thing we've been doing all the time here. Let's guard that we can create a project. If we can't, we're going to send some kind of error. Error. To do. Error. Maybe a pop-up. Maybe a pop-up. Cool. Before I navigate back, I want to perform my post request because I want to be able to make sure before I navigate back that the thing was successful or a failure. Regardless, I want to be able to present some information to the user. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do project API client dot manager dot post project. The project, what is it called, Liana? I want to post a project. This function requires a project. What is the name of the project I'm going to put in here as a parameter? Where is something called users project? Where is something called users project? We have a project already, and it's saved somewhere. This guy, we got a project. Yep. Okay, then we got a result. What have we done with results in the past? We've switched on them because they're an enum. So there's a case where it's a dot success. And I'll just call this success. That's just some data. We could do something with the data. But for right now, if it's successful, we know that this worked, and that's tight. That's really cool. So we'll figure out what to do there in a second. Let this be error. Here, we'll print the error for now. Error. Okay. Let's see if this works. Damn. It failed. Where did it fail? Case, label in a switch should have at least one executable statement. Where are we looking? Help me out. Ah, we gotta do something in the success. What was the success? What happens when we are successful? If we created the thing, what should the user see? If we hit create, where do we want to go? Cool. We're gonna pop this guy off the navigation stack because we're done with them. Neat. If we fail, we print that we failed. We could probably indicate to the user in some way something a little more helpful, maybe using an activity indicator, which I could totally do in the afternoon after lunch, but we don't have the time for it right now. Let's see if we can make it work. You ready? All right. Check it out. We got all these things. Go here. What do you want to call the project? Jocelyn. What do you want to call our project? Anything. What's your choice for the project? All right. New project. I'm going to say it's due next Tuesday at 1:14 p.m. If I hit create, we should navigate back. Nice. Here's the thing. I don't see it in my list here. Let's go look at project tracker. I do see it in here. So this updated, but our app didn't. Shut up. Go away. This updated, but our app didn't. What do you think we'd need to do to see that information? What function would we need to call? Say that louder. We want to reload the data. But here's the thing. Our data right now only loads when we call the view did load. The view did load loads once when you first create it. What? Load it again when we make something new. So we could say, hey you, do me a favor. I'm going to keep a reference to you and I'm going to call your load data. But that's a lot of stuff. What if I want this view controller to handle its own information rather than using some delegation to a view controller we've gone to? Do you guys remember view controller life cycles? They load, they also appear. So we can create this guy. Override function view will appear. Let's see now. All right, Last thing in here is CubePad. Nemo, what's the name of a project you want to make? What? Yeah, give me a name. Anything. Time project. All right. Time project is due Christmas at 1:17. Look at that. Time project is in there because I reloaded the data. We could probably set up some kind of way to sort it, either in our GET request or in the table view. Let's take a look. Yeah, it's kind of random right now. It's probably sorted in some way that the server is dealing with, but we could say to it, give me the data in the way I want. Let's call this one, make everyone feel better. Not going to happen until November, sorry. Now that I've reloaded the data, November 1st, we'll do that. Here's the thing. This load data, when I first launch the app, when I go to this view controller, is going to be called twice. It's going to be called when we do the view did load and the view will appear. It should be your strong preference to only load that when the view is actually going to appear. So, goodbye to you. Treat the view did load as like setup rather than dealing with the UI. And so the setup here is configure the table view. Configure the table view literally just sets the delegate and the data source. View will appear is you saying, looks like in the future, or it looks like we're all set up, we loaded. Shut the fuck up. It looks like the view is about to come into view. That means they're going away, right? No, I guess not. It will start that loading when the view is about to appear. And then we only have to call it in one place. Now we're there. So much to commit. Let's see if I can split it up. So that's the stuff that goes into the view controller. I don't want to do that yet. Here's me adding my post request. Yeah. I'm going to quit the rest of this. I'm going to commit adds post project function in API client get status get add -p create project from fields. Okay, does some stuff in there. Does not do some stuff in there. Does not do some stuff in there. Git commit. Sets up post. Sets up create project in view controller. Git add -p. Yes. Yes. Git commit. Sets table view to load data in view. That's okay. You can all go to lunch. The rest that we would do is UI stuff where we put an activity indicator and we disable that button and all that. And I don't wish that on you. I think you can figure it out yourself. Do you want to do that? Do you want to do that? The UI stuff? What? Yes, okay, so spend your time on that. So what are some questions you have? Do you need time with it?
Yes, I think
Okay,
so.
that's fair.
I have a question.
Hi.
Having mapping security.
Uh,
That's what he said before.
I know.